In addition, pilots often make mistakes, sometimes minor, sometimes outright blunders. Take a look at this. A pair of Russian frogfoot attack aircraft are on a combat mission when suddenly the trailing pilot fires a shot and downs his own wingman. The pilot could do nothing but watch from his parachute as his aircraft exploded. What exactly happened remains unknown. Perhaps they had a morning quarrel over refusing to pour more vodka, but now it doesn't matter. The plane is gone, and in rather spectacular fashion. Ukrainian intelligence is tracking the movement of a Russian supply column. The convoy of trucks is being covered by 2 Russian helicopters, one of them a Mi-24 equipped with reconnaissance systems, but a Ukrainian soldier fires at the helicopter with an Igla system.
Сбили вертолет, подбили! Подбили вертолет!
The Russian Mi-24 helicopter was successfully shot down. A few minutes later, a Ukrainian MiG-29 fighter jet entered the combat zone. The pilot launched 2 precision missiles at Russian ammunition depots. And as we can see in the video, the targets were successfully destroyed. From another angle, we see a massive explosion. Then, with another missile, the Russian command post was eliminated. From the very first days of the war, Russia sought to dominate the skies over Ukraine, yet something went wrong. Aviation was meant to set the pace of combat, shape the scale of operations, and could have become the decisive factor capable of changing the situation in just a matter of days. The situation was so tense that in the chaos of battle, it was easy to open fire on your own, and that's exactly how the Russians nearly shot down their own attack aircraft. Moreover, even a small reconnaissance drone could pose a threat. Look, just a little closer, and the Russian drone could have permanently grounded its own multi-million-dollar aircraft. Remember how they rushed toward Kiev? In the first days of the war, the Russians had a plan, bold and swift, to fly in dozens of helicopters from Belarus. And just so you understand, that's only about 100 kilometers away. They wanted to seize Hostomel Airport in one strike, and that was the key. If they had captured it, there would have been less than 20 kilometers left to Kiev. From there, it would have been just a matter of logistics, landing airborne troops from heavy transport planes, bringing in armor, setting up supply lines, and the capital would be in their grasp. Kiev could have fallen in just a matter of days, and they were convinced it would play out just like in Crimea in 2014, when unmarked armed units simply walked in and took control of key positions. But not this time. Here, they were hit in the teeth right from the very start. Just like in the Crimean scenario, dozens of Russian helicopters violate the state border. Civilians capture everything on camera, even counting their numbers. Meanwhile, the armed forces of Ukraine are already starting to bring that number down. The man behind the camera shouts that 2 helicopters have already been shot down, but there are too many of them, flying deeper inland toward their target, the airport. As they approach, Ukrainian forces keep bringing them down. One helicopter is destroyed, another is damaged and forced to make an emergency landing.
Он подбитый, смотри, сейчас будет падать. Один уже сбили.
This video comes from the very Russian helicopter just filmed by civilians. To be fair, the pilot is acting very professionally and composed.
Мужики, я подбит, кто видит кашу, обозначаю себя, иду на вынужденную. Покинуть борт.
However, it's no secret that the Russians deployed their best elite units to capture the airport. We already know how the situation unfolded. But now, a lesser-known episode that took place in the same area. These were two Ukrainian attack aircraft operating in the Hostomel airport area. While the Russians were landing troops from helicopters, they began pulling in heavy equipment and fuel trucks. One of the aircraft carried out a precise strike, causing a massive detonation. The second pilot attempted to destroy another column that was approaching, but came under fire from every weapon the enemy could bring to bear. His aircraft was hit. Then, he made one final decision: to steer his machine straight into that very column. In the last moments, you can see he tried to eject, but unfortunately, the angle and altitude were not in his favor. Sometime later, local residents who had evacuated captured on camera the aftermath of the pilot's heroic act. Meanwhile, Russian fighter jets were attempting to gain control of the skies over the capital. One of the rare episodes of this aerial clash can be seen right now. A Ukrainian fighter skillfully outmaneuvers a Russian aircraft trying to break away and escape. But the missile proved faster. With a single precise shot, the Ukrainian pilot destroys the enemy aircraft. While the capital holds its defenses, active assault operations with air support erupt all along the front line. In the east, a Russian fullback takes a direct hit to its engines and bursts into flames. The pilots try to keep the aircraft under control, but the damage is critical. The plane goes down. Watch the moment before the explosion. You can clearly see both pilots eject in time, their parachutes already deployed. The situation in southern Ukraine is also turning out poorly for Russian aviation. This pilot was lucky enough to eject, but ended up in Ukrainian captivity. During the initial quick interrogation right on the spot, when asked, "Where are you from?" the pilot replied, "The Far East." In other words, he flew 8,000 kilometers just to attack, and ultimately get shot down in a foreign land. Brilliant. Helicopters were actively used by the Russians in the early stages of the invasion. Here, for example, you can see how they tried to evacuate one of their infantry groups, but even then, drone operators were already shattering all their plans. A drone strikes near the vehicle, and the helicopter, without hesitation, turns around and flees, leaving the group stranded on the ground. The infantry, confused and in disarray, scrambles to retreat back into the tree line. But Ukrainians didn't just scare them off with drones. They began destroying enemy helicopters en masse. No one knows exactly how many aircraft the Russians had to lose before they finally realized. For Ukrainian soldiers armed with Stingers, these were prized and easy targets. The Russians outnumber Ukrainian aviation 10-1, and that's counting only combat aircraft. But numbers don't mean quality. Many of their planes are worn out and in desperate need of upgrades. For example, one aircraft in Crimea had just taken off, but managed to stay in the air for only a few seconds before plummeting to the ground like a heavy stone. However, the scale of Russian aviation should not be underestimated. It played a key role in the occupation of Mariupol. The number of Russian combat sorties reached up to 40 per day. They dropped bombs of every modification, type, and weight, targeting one of the largest steel plants in Europe, Azovstal, with particular brutality, unleashing FABs with an insane explosive charge weighing up to 1,500 kilograms. They continued to use this tactic in the following months. But the truly insane part is that they drop bombs on anything and everything, leveling every kilometer of Ukrainian land without caring whether it's a legitimate military target or just a civilian area. They simply erase everything in their path, kilometer after kilometer. Ukrainian aviation has entirely different priorities. They strike command centers and, using high-precision GBU-62 bombs from a safe distance, destroy trenches and strongpoints that are well fortified against infantry assaults. Look at this erased, destroyed city where hundreds of thousands of people once lived. Unfortunately, a reconnaissance drone now spots an enemy Russian UAV operator group, and the Air Force is already doing its job. Another location requiring careful aerial inspection, as the Russian UAV pilot's passes are completely invalid here. This is how Russian forces engage with a small bridge in southern Ukraine, in the city of Kherson. To get close enough to drop aerial bombs, a comprehensive approach and careful preparation are required. You could say that each bombing run is a risky and calculated operation. But wait, this is just a small bridge. Now, just watch this video without commentary and notice, the area around the bridge is densely populated, home to many people. Yet, of course, the Russians pay no attention to this and don't give it a second thought. At the moment, the bridge is still standing, with only minor damage. If we keep score, it's currently 0-6 in favor of the bridge. In other words, the Russians have spent enormous resources and still haven't achieved their goal, even after the 6th attempt. The Russians continue to make mistakes, venturing too far from their borders and the front line into Ukrainian territory. As you can see, the Ukrainians don't mind. They're more than happy to welcome these uninvited guests. There's still a small sliver of hope in the world that diplomatic and sanctions pressure could impact Russia's economy enough for soldiers to return to their own territory and push their military machine, which, no matter how hard they try, can no longer lift off the ground.